Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really focusing in on recovery, but maybe from an angle that doesn't always get the spotlight.
That's right. We're looking beyond the person's struggling directly with addiction.
Exactly. We're dedicating this exploration to Al-Anon. You know, the program specifically for families, for friends of alcoholics.
And it's such a crucial area because, well, when someone you love is caught in addiction's grip, the ripple effect on your own life, your own well-being, it can be massive.
Immense. So our mission today really is to unpack the role of sponsorship within Al-Anon.
We want to understand how those core 12-step ideas, originally built for tackling addiction to a substance, get adapted.
Adapted for a different kind of struggle. Right?
Yeah. The challenge here isn't necessarily the substance itself. It's the chaos, the heartbreak, the sheer difficulty caused by someone else's choices and actions, often involving things like betrayal, neglect.
It really is that unique challenge, isn't it? Loving an addict. And the sources point to a really stark difference in how powerlessness is defined.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
In AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, the fight is pretty clear, right? Powerlessness over alcohol, this external substance that's kind of hijacked things.
Right. But in Al-Anon,
In Al-Anon, the struggle is, well, it's deeply internal. It's relational. The sources are clear. It often centers on a kind of self-destruction linked to co-addiction.
co-addiction, how does that manifest?
It can look like passively watching your own life go by, letting others make all the big decisions, maybe superficial relationships because the deep stuff is too painful, and dealing with that ongoing trauma, neglect, betrayal, sometimes even exploitation, all stemming from the addict's behavior.
Wow. The source material describes that harm pretty vividly, doesn't it?
It does. It talks about harm as the result of instincts in collision, causing damage, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual damage to people. It's not abstract.
And it's fascinating, how family members often walk into Al-Anon for the first time kind of with the wrong map.
Totally. They're asking questions focused outward, like, should I leave him, or how can I make her stop, or how do I end the abuse?
Questions about controlling the other person.
Exactly. But the whole point of Al-Anon really is that you eventually have to let go of finding answers about the alcoholic
And start finding answers.
that are right for you, for yourself. It's a huge shift in focus.
From trying to fix the other person, which, let's be honest, is impossible,
Right, impossible.
to fixing your own internal world, your own beliefs that have kept you kind of stuck in that chaotic orbit.
Precisely. And that's where the sponsor comes in. They're framed not just as a guide, but the sources use the term trusted servant.
A trusted servant. I like that.
Yeah, someone who helps you navigate that really deep psychological and often spiritual shift. The redefinition you need for your own survival, your own growth, getting your own sense of self back.
The person who helps you break free from constantly revolving around the addict.
That's a great way to put it. They help you shift your center of gravity back to yourself.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if the sponsor is guiding this whole psychological reset, we have to start where all 12-step work starts. Step 1.
Yep. Acceptance of powerlessness.
Let's dig into that first section then. Redefining powerlessness and expectations. Steps 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. So step 1 in Al-Anon. It starts with admitting powerlessness, like you said. But it's very specific. It's powerlessness over the other person.
Not over a substance, but over a human being.
Right. And the unmanageability they talk about, it's often twisted in the person's mind into some kind of personal failure. If I were just a better wife, or if I loved him more, or if I were smarter.
Then they wouldn't drink. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The program has to sort of re-educate them. The unmanageability isn't a reflection on you. It's the simple, stark inability to control another person's life, their choices, their drinking or using.
That sounds, well, liberating maybe on paper, but I imagine it's terrifying to actually accept.
Oh, incredibly. Because for years, maybe their whole life has been organized around trying to manage that chaos, trying to be the control tower.
Their sense of purpose, maybe even safety, was tied up in that effort.
Absolutely. And the sources talk about this trap of false expectations that keeps the co-addictive behavior going.
False expectations. Like what?
Like consistently turning to someone deep in active alcoholism for things like steady affection or reliable emotional support or stability. The source has this great analogy.
Oh, yeah.
It's like going to a hardware store for bread.
That's perfect. You're looking for nourishment where they only sell hammers and nails.
Precisely. The issue isn't that the loved one is incapable of meeting those needs in some fundamental way, maybe. But the problem is the expectation itself is misplaced right now.
You're looking for nurture from someone who's currently drowning in chaos themselves.
Exactly. And realizing that is painful. It means giving up the hope, maybe, that your love alone could somehow fix them or fix the whole situation.
And what happens if someone keeps ignoring that? Keeps going back to the hardware store, hoping for that loaf of bread? Psychologically, what's the toll?
Well, the consequence of constantly focusing outward on the alcoholic is you end up sabotaging yourself. Your own life stalls.
How so?
You keep engaging in those co-addictive behaviors, or maybe you emotionally numb out, kind of like drinking emotionally, to avoid making your own hard choices.
Choices like setting a boundary, or maybe even leaving.
Right. Painful choices.
Mm.
And the sources talk about that awful feeling, waking up day after day, and those critical decisions are still just hanging there, unfaced.
Like weights around your neck.
Yeah, the source is like pieces of lead,
Hmm.
just weighing you down. And this leads straight into that pattern of passivity you mentioned earlier.
Right, passivity. Tell me more about how that looks in this context.
The sources describe it as becoming a passive observer of one's own life. You're watching things happen rather than making things happen.
Letting the addict's crisis dictate everything.
Everything, the family schedule, the mood in the house, the finances,
Mm.
you just hang back, reacting to whatever the addict does or doesn't do. Your own needs, your goals, even your sense of who you are gets pushed aside, defined by their chaos.
Okay, so then step 3, making that decision to turn your will and life over to the care of a higher power. That sounds like the direct antidote to that passivity.
It is. It's the moment you decide, okay, I'm going to actively participate in my own life again, but with guidance from something wiser.
Taking the steering wheel back, but maybe letting a higher power be the navigator.
Good analogy. But you can imagine, for someone whose whole life has been about frantic attempts to control everything and everyone,
Yeah.
letting go, surrendering.
Terrifying.
Deeply terrifying. They might try to surrender, but then instinctively they snatch everything right back.
Yeah.
Because not being in control feels like falling without a net.
The fear is huge.
So how does the sponsor help someone navigate that fear? It must be rooted in some deep distrust, right? Distrust of the process, maybe distrust of themselves, or any kind of power outside themselves.
Yeah, the sponsor has to work really carefully here. Gently. Reframing what surrender actually means.
How do they do that?
Well, they might use analogies. The source mentions one about dancing.
Dancing? Yeah. Like, if both partners try to lead, it's just chaos, right? Clumsy, stepping on toes, bucking, as the source says.
Right. Confusion.
But when one partner, the follower that's the Al-Anon member here, relaxes, trusts, and lets the other partner, the higher power, lead the dance.
Then it flows effortlessly.
Exactly, it flows. But that fear often comes from way back. Early life stuff. Maybe relying on authority figures led to being let down or even hurt.
Which leads us right into that whole spiritual guidance piece for the co-addict. Addressing those fears may be connected to what the sources call a broken attachment model.
Absolutely vital. This is core Al-Anon work. The member starts to learn, maybe for the first time, that their higher power isn't like those unreliable or harsh figures from the past.
So what is this higher power like?
Gentle, protective, guiding, loving, someone who holds them safely every day. This is the direct opposite of those negative ideas of God or authority they might carry.
And the sources actually categorize those negative ideas.
They do. They talk about the punishing God, judgmental, strict, waiting to zap you, or the non-involved God, distant, doesn't care, disengaged.
Images that often mirror early caregivers, maybe, or just that harsh inner critic.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
So recovery, with the sponsor's help, becomes about building a relationship with a different kind of higher power, or just a concept of goodness, maybe. One of the sources call accepting.
Accepting, meaning?
Meaning caring, loving, reliable, predictable, trustworthy. It's fundamentally about healing that broken attachment model they've been carrying maybe since childhood.
So the redefinition isn't just about powerlessness, it's about the nature of power itself, shifting from a potentially harmful concept of power to a loving one.
That's the core shift. The sponsor helps them see how step one forced them to name their own patterns, their codependence, what the sources call the one-dimensional addicted self.
The reactive self, the controlling self, the fearful self.
All of that. And then steps 2 and 3 guide them towards something deeper, wiser within themselves, accepting a new self-definition, moving towards, as the source puts it, a multifaceted self in relationship to others and to God.
I can see how practical that is. Before, it was all, what does the alcoholic need? What are they thinking? And now?
Yeah, finally, they learn to ask, okay, wait, What do I think? What do I feel? What's my truth here?
Giving birth to their own self, in a way.
Exactly. And that turn inward, that intense internal focus, naturally leads us to the next big chunk of work.
Yeah.
Section 2, inventory and confession, steps 4 and 5. This is where the sponsor really acts as that psychological anchor.
Okay, so if that old self was focused outward, what does the fourth step inventory dig into for the co-addict? Is it just listing resentments against the alcoholic?
Sometimes, yes, but it often goes much deeper than that. The fourth step in Al-Anon, according to the sources, frequently focuses less on, say, dramatic actions they took and more on those really ingrained feelings of unworthiness.
Unworthiness, that sounds like the bedrock issue.
It often is. The sources say it's core to the belief system of both addicts and co-addicts. So the inventory becomes about uncovering that hidden architecture of self-doubt, maybe even self-hatred.
And what are the consequences of living with that core belief if you feel fundamentally unworthy?
The materials point to loneliness as the deepest consequence. And not just being physically alone.
No.
No, it's a separation caused by that feeling of unworthiness. It separates you from the most vital relationship you have,
Cheers.
the relationship with yourself. If you secretly hold yourself in contempt, you project that onto everything. You might think you have to manipulate people or control them or constantly rescue them just to earn your place.
Wow. So the inventory involves listing those specific, often unconscious beliefs that fuel the loneliness, the passivity, the control attempts.
Exactly. You're listing the internal script. Maybe writing down, I believe I am a deceptive person, because you realize how much you've hidden or lied to cover up the chaos.
Or listing the pattern of passivity itself.
Definitely. Those times you just stood back and let things happen, let others make decisions for you. You also list resentment, sure, against the alcoholic, but maybe also against people who seem to have normal lives.
It sounds like trying to unearth all the ways you've bought into the idea that you're somehow bad or fundamentally flawed.
That's a good way to put it, facing those deeply rooted false beliefs head on.
But wait, if the whole point is to stop judging everyone, including yourself, and move towards gentleness, doesn't labeling things as flaws or liabilities risk just reinforcing self-judgment? How does the sponsor stop this from becoming just more self-bashing?
That is such a critical point, and it's probably the sponsor's most delicate balancing act in step 4.
How do they manage it?
They constantly, gently bring it back to that new framework of an accepting higher power. The goal isn't self-condemnation, it's honesty about being human.
Seeing the patterns without beating yourself up for them?
Exactly. The sponsor helps the member distinguish. Okay, maybe the actions were harmful or the beliefs were messed up, but you, the person, are not fundamentally damaged goods. Making mistakes, having flawed thinking, that's part of being human. It's not, as the sources say, a character defect in itself.
So the inventory list isn't a weapon for self-attack. It's more like a map showing where the pain comes from.
Precisely. It illuminates. It doesn't indict.
Okay. So once that searching and fearless inventory is done, step 5 comes along, admitting all this stuff, the exact nature of our wrongs to another human being, usually the sponsor. Why is that step so crucial? Can't you just admit it to yourself and your higher power?
You can, and you do.
Mm-hmm.
But the sources stress that shame thrives in secrecy, and co-addiction is often fueled by keeping secrets, by isolation.
So the external witness breaks the isolation.
It breaks the isolation and deflates the ego. It lifts the shame. That act of confession, whether it's formally reading the inventory pages aloud or just talking through your life story with a really good listener, the sources describe it as puncturing the membrane of isolation you've lived inside. It brings a sense of wholeness, connection.
It's a reality check, maybe? Saying it out loud makes it real, but also manageable?
Absolutely. And imagine the relief. Shame starts to dissolve when you realize, okay, I've just laid out all the stuff I'm most ashamed of, my fears, my controlling behavior, my passivity, my resentments. And this person, this trusted sponsor, is still sitting here. They haven't run screaming.
They're still beside you.
That acceptance from another person, which might be the complete opposite of the judgment they've lived with, that's what starts to really break the hold of that core unworthiness.
So after going through that, what's the big payoff? The emotional or spiritual reward for steps 4 and 5?
The sources say the great dividend is humility.
Humility, which people often misunderstand, right? Thinking it means being a doormat.
Exactly. But in this context, the sources define it really clearly. It's a realistic recognition of what and who we really are, warts and all, followed by a genuine attempt to become what we could be.
So it's grounded self-acceptance, not putting yourself down.
Not at all. It's knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, realistically.
And how does that newfound humility change things back in the messy reality of their family life?
Well, in the family context, humility means, as the source puts it, climbing down from the ladder of judgment.
Judgment of.
Of everyone, judging the addict, judging yourself constantly, judging the whole world for not being fair. Humility means stepping off that ladder and just taking your rightful place as
As.
just another human being. Fallible, imperfect, but part of this worldwide circle of people trying to live better, offering love and support.
And the sponsor's role is crucial there, guiding them away from judgment towards
Yeah.
gentleness.
Gentleness with their own humanness, as the sources call it. Accepting imperfection. That shift is absolutely essential before they can even think about repairing relationships with others.
Okay, that makes sense. Moving from self-judgment to self-acceptance paves the way for making things right externally. Which brings us to step 8. Let's get into section 3. Amends, boundaries, and ending relational harm. Steps 8 and 9 sound really complex here.
They are. Step 8 is making that list of all persons we had harmed. And for the family member, the non-drinker, this can be a real shocker
Why a shock?
because they often see themselves purely as the victim, realizing they've also caused harm within that dysfunctional system. It's a tough pill to swallow.
So we need a broad definition of harm here.
Absolutely. The sources define it very practically, the result of instincts in collision, causing physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual damage.
Okay, so if the alcoholic's harm is often obvious, maybe financial ruin, verbal abuse, broken promises, what does the co-addict's harm look like? It's often more subtle, right?
Much more subtle, often. And it tends to fall into a couple of big categories. Control is one.
Trying to manage the addict, manipulate situations.
Right. Which can feel like emotional violence to others. The other big category is what the sources call sins of omission.
Omission, meaning things they didn't do.
Exactly. Maybe dropping out of family life because they were so consumed by the chaos, not sending birthday cards, not being emotionally available for their other kids, the non-alcoholic ones.
Letting relationships just drift because they were too busy trying to control the uncontrollable.
Precisely. Or maybe they harmed their own parents by constantly needing to be rescued. Or harmed their children by always putting the alcoholic's needs or moods first, sacrificing the kid's stability. It's about seeing their part in the whole messy dynamic.
And the purpose of making amends, step 9, it's not just about saying sorry, is it?
No, not at all. The word itself is key. Amend. It means to change, to improve, to fix the underlying behavior.
So it's about structural change, not just apologies for the past.
Exactly. Restitution might be part of it sometimes, but the real focus is on changing future actions. The sponsor helps keep the member focused on their behavioral changes, not just wallowing in guilt about what's already happened.
Okay, now step 9 itself, making these amends. This must be where sponsor guidance is absolutely critical, especially if the relationships are still ongoing and potentially toxic.
This is probably the most intricate part of the work in Al-Anon. Amends are rarely simple apologies here. They often involve really complex, sometimes life-altering relational choices.
So what might amends look like in this context?
The sponsor guides them through possibilities. It could be a direct conversation, carefully planned, about past harms. More often, maybe, it's living amends.
Living amends.
Yeah, consistently demonstrating new behavior, like actively stopping that passive observation and taking charge of your own finances or your career or your social life. Showing, not just telling.
And crucially, I remember reading amends can involve boundaries.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Sometimes the healthiest, most honest amend you can make is simply adopting a new attitude towards someone on your list. Maybe one of detachment with love, no longer engaging in the old dance.
Or even deciding not to engage at all.
Yes. Significantly, the sources say an amend might involve deciding not to include a certain person in your life anymore, setting a firm, self-protective boundary.
Wow. For someone who may be confused merging with love or control with care, that decision to separate, sometimes completely, that's a profound kind of amend.
It really is. It acknowledges that the relationship itself was causing harm, perhaps mutual harm. It's the opposite of that old passivity. It's taking definitive action for your own well-being.
An act of self-mastery almost.
That's a good term for it. But, and this is a huge, but the sponsor's guidance here is absolutely paramount. They have to ensure the amends don't cause more harm.
Right, the principle of except when to do so would injure them or others.
Exactly. The sponsor has to help the member check their motives. Is this amend genuinely about healing and changing behavior? Or is it maybe about unloading your own guilt onto someone else? using step 9 as an excuse to just dump.
Can you give an example of how an amend could cause more harm? What do the sources warn against?
They're very clear about this.
Yeah.
The sponsor has to be vigilant. You cannot use honesty as a weapon.
Meaning?
Meaning, for instance, you don't unload a detailed account of extramarital adventuring upon the shoulders of our unsuspecting wife or husband just to clear your own conscience.
That's not an amend, that's just making them carry your burden.
Exactly. It's using them as like a spiritual dumping ground. The goal isn't to shatter someone else's peace of mind or their faith in relationships. Honesty needs to be balanced with kindness, common sense, and really careful timing.
The aim is to lighten crosses, not make them heavier.
Precisely. So the sponsor is helping with that ethical calculation. Will this specific action help the other person heal, or will it just transfer my shame onto them? If it's the latter, it's not a true amend.
It's about mature, grounded decisions, not emotional outbursts or self-flagellation disguised as virtue.
Exactly. Even with financial amends, the sponsor ensures it's responsible, that the member isn't, creating further hardship for themselves or others just to look good. It's about achieving a kind of emotional sobriety for the non-drinker, which actually helps stabilize the whole family system.
Okay, so once that external repair work is underway, through amends and boundaries, the focus really shifts inward again to maintenance. That takes us to section 4, ongoing recovery and service, steps 10, 11, and 12. Lifelong spiritual fitness.
Right. Step 10, the continuous inventory, is where recovery stops being just crisis management and becomes a daily practice, moment by moment sometimes.
Keeping that emotional balance.
Yeah. The goal is ongoing honesty, admitting mistakes quickly to yourself, to your higher power, maybe to others if appropriate, so you don't get bogged down by the old patterns of denial or justification.
So what does that daily practice look like for the co-addict? How does it address their specific internal struggles?
A big part of it is catching that negative self-talk, that voice rooted in the unworthiness they uncovered in step 4.
The "you're not good enough" voice,
Yeah.
or the "you have to fix this" voice.
Exactly. Step 10 for the Al-Anon member is constant vigilance against that internal narrative, and it involves reframing mistakes.
Oh, so reframing mistakes.
Instead of seeing a slip-up, maybe a moment of resentment flares up, or they catch themselves trying to control something minor. Instead of seeing that as a huge personal failure, that means they're not doing a recovery right.
Yeah.
They learn to see it simply as part of being human. Acknowledge it, learn from it, maybe make a quick amend if needed, and move on, without the self-bashing.
So it's about stopping the pursuit of perfection.
Absolutely. The sources say the work is replacing negative illusions with positive truths. Actively choosing your thoughts, letting them be teachers, rather than letting the old, fearful, self-sabotaging thoughts run the show. Real-time self-correction.
That kind of self-regulation must build a foundation for healthier connections, right? Allowing them to turn outwards again, but this time from a place of strength for step 12.
It's the natural outcome. Carrying the message. The sponsor helps the member figure out how to share their experience, not just reciting the steps, but explaining how they made it work for them.
Sharing your personal story.
Yeah, how they reworked, translated, revised, or otherwise molded the steps until they were relevant to their situation as a family member dealing with relational chaos, not necessarily a substance issue themselves.
That personal touch must be what makes the message so powerful for newcomers. It shows the principles are adaptable.
Totally. And the act of sharing is incredibly healing for the person doing the sharing too. It creates, as the sources say, a profound gratitude.
Lets them see how far they've actually come.
Exactly. They appreciate this new way of living, feeling alive, present, and aware, instead of stuck in that old passive observer mode. And the core message they pass on, it's about replacing that old need for power and control with cooperation, care, and this kind of inclusive spirituality.
That sounds like a really healthy, balanced place to land.
Yeah.
But it does bring up a potential conflict, doesn't it? Especially thinking about Al-Anon's Tradition 5.
Ah, yes, the perceived contradiction. That's key.
Tradition 5 talks about carrying the message, but it also specifically mentions encouraging and understanding our alcoholic relatives. How does that square with the message of focusing on yourself? It sounds like pulling in two different directions.
It does sound like it, and it trips up a lot of members initially. Wait, I thought I was supposed to detach. How can I encourage them and focus on me?
Self-preservation versus caring for the other person. It seems like a paradox. How does the sponsor help navigate that?
The program and the sponsor's guidance helps them find the middle ground. It's about moving away from the extremes.
Extremes like?
Like before Al-Anon, maybe they were totally wrapped around the alcoholic, losing themselves completely. That's one extreme, codependence. Or maybe in early recovery, they swung to the other extreme, cutting everyone off, focusing only on self, building walls.
Okay, so Al-Anon helps them find a balance.
Exactly. It brings them back to center. It teaches them how to love the person, perhaps, without needing to control them or change them. And critically, without losing themselves in the process.
Loving them the way they are without having to change them or myself, that's powerful.
It's the ultimate blend of acceptance and boundaries. Being able to be present, maybe offer support, but not as their manager, not as their fixer, but as a separate, whole individual with your own life.
That really is the serenity the program talks about, isn't it? Freedom from the obsession, freedom found in accepting powerlessness over others, but embracing power over your own internal life.
It's the whole journey in a nutshell. Guided by sponsorship, moving from managing the chaos outside to cultivating peace inside. Using the steps to rewrite those old life scripts based on shame or unworthiness. Discovering, as one source puts it, that a loving heart is the beginning of all knowledge.
What a transformation! From feeling powerless over external events to finding real power within yourself, an internal reconstruction project?
And it's radical because they're consciously replacing an old, unconscious, destructive system of beliefs and behaviors with a conscious healing one. The sources point out something really insightful, that the urge to drink for the alcoholic is often like this weird act of faith, a twisted belief that this action will fix something.
Okay.
Well, if the co-addict's old way of operating, maybe based on passivity or control or isolation, was also an unconscious, twisted system that just led to more pain, then their recovery program becomes their new conscious act of faith.
The structural change in their approach to life is the core thing.
Absolutely. Which leads to a really important question for you, listening to this deep dive. If your own self-mastery, your willingness to be guided, to change those core self-defeating patterns, is now your conscious act of faith, what destructive patterns might you still be confusing with intimacy? Or maybe confusing with safety or necessary control?
That's a question that demands a fearless inventory, doesn't it? It seems the ultimate freedom Al-Anon offers isn't just about letting go of trying to control the addict, but about deliberately, consciously taking control of your own inner world, guided by these principles: honesty, humility, service, directed inward first.